Let me just adjust this. Is that okay, Uncle Tom? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, super. Yeah, I've got a bit of an ear infection at the moment. It feels like my left side of my head is heavier than my right. But I hear some lovely singing, despite not being able to hear out of one ear, which is rather annoying. But yeah, a new experience anyway to try and preach despite only being able to hear out of one ear. But anyway, welcome everyone. Today we want to celebrate an important day within our holy community, which is Heavenly Parents' Day. So celebrating that there is a Heavenly Parent and acknowledging that we come from a Heavenly Parent, which means we are brothers and sisters, we are part of a heavenly family. I really struggled to conceptualise this sermon. We had a meeting about 2 weeks ago to decide who was going to preach today and then who's going to preach on the 28th, which is when the next worship service is going to be. Viola was going to do Sunday school. I was looking at David on the Zoom call saying, oh, please be David, please be David, please be David. Then Patricia said, oh, why don't you preach this Sunday service since I'll be on holiday, the next one. So thank you, Patricia, for pushing me to grow and pushing me to be better. Actually, related to Patricia's testimony, she gave me a small box of chocolates, which are beautifully wrapped and put together to give out to the Muslim community. Now, I'm from Wales, a small village in South Wales, and I didn't know any Muslims until I realised that the corner store I go to almost every other day when I walk the dog, the gentleman in there is a Muslim. So actually Patricia again pushed me to grow and to speak to people. I gave him this little box of chocolates and he was very moved and touched. So, thank you for your devotion, thank you for your hard work. I wish I could emulate some of that. So often being challenged, being pushed to grow is a good thing, although rather uncomfortable at times. So the message today is to inhale God and to exhale God. And when we breathe, we have to breathe in first before we breathe out. Similarly, if we see ripples in the river, something must hit the river. A stone must hit the river first for the ripples to start. So the conclusion to my message is to bring God into your life and from that central point to work outwards. What I really appreciate about Father Moon's teaching is it's very simple but effective. It starts with yourself, harmony within yourself. And then when there's harmony, God can dwell. God can only work within the principle, and the principle is good. So we need to have a good start, a fresh start within ourselves for God to come. From there we expand to our family. Once we have our families, we can expand to the wider community or to tribes. When we come together then, we can start changing nations. And together, when many nations think this way in a God-centered way, they can work together to start shaping a general culture and eventually the world. And this really is the roadmap for peace, the roadmap for happiness. Very simple, but very clear. Has anyone had any experiences with the Holy Salt over the last month? They would like to share quickly. Okay, so I think was it last month or in January, Mother Moon distributed this special salt which is used to cleanse our environments and which we can use as part of our spiritual toolbox. Now, I've been struggling with a few personal things over the last few weeks. I won't share the details yet because I haven't come out the other side fully to give a testimony and to share about that. But this was part of my struggles with trying to conceptualise and to speak today. If you're feeling a bit blocked, a bit heavy, a bit burdened, then it's difficult to share something and to pour yourself out, especially in this role as a pastor. So what I decided to do, Mother Moon is often telling us two things at the start of her speeches. Number one is to be healthy. Now, especially when I give Sunday services or hear other people speak, people often say, welcome, I hope you're all well, but it doesn't really mean too much other than, a mandatory thing to say within a speech. But what Mother Moon is asking us is to live long, healthy lives, to look after our spirit, our mind, our body, so we can continually experience God and continually learn and grow and continually shape the communities we're part of. It's not just a mandatory remark, but our time here on earth is really a chance to grow and experience and learn and develop. This is really our training grounds, a training grounds of love while we're here on this earth. The next thing that Mother emphasises in her speeches is also that we need to focus on our environment, grow, nurture, develop our environment, this environment of love. So I was looking around my house, and we have a 8-month-old. You might hear her screaming and shouting in the back, or maybe that's Kyan as well. But yeah, my house was really messy. As you know, mess comes along with children and babies, reusable nappies everywhere, toys everywhere. And I thought, this is probably not helping on my spiritual journey. This is probably not helping with my connection with God. So I started in my office to have a spring clean, a tidy up. And I thought, while I'm here, while I'm on a roll, I may as well do the other areas of the house. So I started cleaning, tidying, recycling, throwing things away. I decided just to holy salt then, as I was going along, to cleanse the spiritual atmosphere as well. And I got to my front door, and I've only heard God's voice twice in my life before, but I heard very clearly this voice say, "When are you going to let me in then?" I thought, wow, it's very true. I haven't invited God into my home. I haven't invited God intimately and deeply into all aspects of my life. Yes, I'm a pastor, I do volunteering, community work, phone calls, and that time is very much dedicated for God. But how about the times when I'm going to the gym or mountain biking or just spending time with Elliot and Kyan? Is God invited into those areas as well? So I heard very clearly this voice said, "Okay, when can I come in? When are you going to invite me in?" I said, not yet. I wouldn't even invite my neighbours into my house at the moment. It was that messy and cluttered. All my friends or family, let alone inviting the King of Kings, the Heavenly Parent, into my home. So I said, let me finish cleaning and tidying and holy salting. Then you can come in. You are more than welcome to come in and stay. And that, as I was praying and reflecting, that reminded me of the second sermon I ever gave. I think I was about 19 at the time, so 12 years ago now. And it was titled Door Handles and Destinies, I think. Yeah, Door Handles and Destiny. I think it was quite a good sermon, although it was very secular. There was no spiritual message there. There was no connection to God. Does anyone want to guess what the message might be, given the title? It's very much like Martin's titles, isn't it? A bit ominous, a bit cryptic.
Open the door and go in.
Okay, almost. It was actually the opposite. Open the door and go out. So the idea was, whenever you leave the house, one of the last things you do is pull the door handle up and lock the door. So based off that, then the talk was that every time we go out of the house, it's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to go out, leave your house, go out into the wider community, and a chance to change, a chance for you to come back better than when you left. So essentially that door handle's an opportunity to go out, start something new, but then when you come home you've learned, maybe you've had a good experience, a bad experience, but either way it's a chance to grow. You come back in, you shut the door handle, and then you've come back different. So when you've left, you've made that intention, you've had that intentionality to go out, do something, be different when you come back, to learn and grow. But essentially I'd missed God from that sermon. I'd missed God from that message. How does our growth and our intentionality relates to the Heavenly Parent and to a life of faith? So I'm going to rectify that today with this message. First though, I want to go to the Bible and the book of Daniel, which has really been so edifying and spiritually nourishing reading this book, the book of Daniel, over and over again. I think I've read it about three or four times the last 2 weeks to try and prepare. And I hadn't really touched on this story before in my studies, not deeply anyway. I'd glanced over it, but there's some really important messages here about door handles, windows, and looking outwards and starting with God. So for those of you who don't know, Daniel could interpret dreams, he could understand God's will, and he'd made friends with King Darius, who really valued this skill that Daniel had to interpret dreams and to understand what God's will was. So King Darius praised Daniel. He raised him up into a high position in his council, a high position within his community, because of Daniel's ability to analyse dreams, understand dreams, and understand God's will. However, other princes in Israel at the time, other ministers, if you like, would be the equivalent of our members of parliament. I didn't like that Daniel was favoured by this king, that Daniel rose to prominence. and that he had this special skill which they did not have. So they decided to make a rule that you weren't allowed to pray without getting permission from the king, and this was to last 30 days. So they passed this law, and then King Darius also agreed somehow that, okay, no one is allowed to pray without confirming this with me, without asking my permission. And Daniel understand that this law was passed, obviously, because he was part of the committee, who was part of, if you like, the parliament that was involved in decision making and law making. So he knew that this was passed. Yet he decided not to change his actions, which is a bit awkward for me to see. By Daniel 6:10, it says, "Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day, and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he did formerly." And then what happened then? These members of parliament, the princes, they heard Daniel. They came to Daniel's house, they saw his windows were open, and they saw he was praying. What happened then? They reported that to the king, and the king says, okay, I can't go back on my word. So the punishment is you are locked in a den of lions, and a stone is put in front of the entrance. That was a crime for praying without permission. Anyway, the king then, he doesn't want to do this. He realised that this is a mistake, and all night then he's praying, and the Bible states he fasted. He set that condition for God to work, that he was going to fast. He declined music being played to him, and he was in turmoil all night. Come the morning then, at the crack of dawn, he himself personally goes to the cave and moves the stone, and he finds Daniel completely unharmed, and that the lions' mouths were shut, essentially. What I want to focus in on this story is the fact that Daniel had his windows open. So he knew that the secular world around him, he knew that the community around him had forbidden him to pray without asking for permission. Yet he had that fortitude, he had the strength to not change his beliefs based on the secular world around him, based on the poor decisions of people around him. So what he was doing, he was inhaling God, he was bringing God in, and started with God in his home. What I also find really theologically interesting is that his windows were open. He was unashamedly not just praying once a day, not just praying before meals, not just doing maybe the mandatory prayer before bed, but praying 3 times a day, not giving insert whatever word you want, but not caring, praying with his windows open, proclaiming he was the son of God, a child of God, and he was eager to build this relationship, and that he would not be stopped despite the rules around him. So I find it really interesting that the windows were open, and he was sharing with everyone despite this rule that was in place, that he had faith, that he was continually building his faith. So similarly then we have the opportunity to, when we leave our house, to open the door and to change, to be different. We also have the chance to open our windows and to be unashamedly children of God, unashamedly people of faith as well. Our sister, sorry, what's your name again? Parvin mentioned earlier that things start with the family, and that justice is good. So there was justice in this story after King Darius found Daniel unharmed. He actually threw the other politicians and the princes in the cave with the lions. And the Bible continues then to say that when the king returned, there was only destroyed bones left. Justice had been done. And now we might say this is quite harsh, but when we look at the Old Testament, it was very much an eye for an eye. If you had wronged someone, you would be wronged in the same way. And by today's standards, that seems incredibly harsh, incredibly unfair. But actually, justice is very clear that rights have to be wronged. Wrongs have to be put right. Oops, went too far. So, how do we relate that to our lives of faith today? It's a quote from Father Moon, 3rd of April. It says, "When in Rome, do as the Romans do." Does anyone want to have a guess and try and complete that quote?
Going along with people.
Okay, so when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Go along with people or don't go along with people? Don't go along with people. Any other guesses? What Father Moon might have said? When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Okay, so maybe when in Rome, do as Romans do and surpass them.
Yeah.
Okay, so do better, go above expectations. That could be. Uncle Radek, your fellow teacher in the room, what do you think?
No idea.
No problem. So I'll finish the quote for you. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. This is true for heaven and the universe. Go to heaven and follow the principles of heaven. The universe will not support anyone who follows individualism. So essentially what Father is saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, but when walking on the spiritual path, do what the spiritual path does, or do what the spiritual do. So understand heaven, implement heaven within our lives. Be a person of God, unashamedly, with your windows open. Even though society might be warped, even though society might be degenerating, your truth, your relationship with God is unchanging in that environment. I have an essay to do for my psychotherapy course at university, and I got sidetracked looking into sexual promiscuity and the effects on people's mental health. There was a very interesting study that came out of Denmark, which looked at women who had multiple sexual partners, how that impacts mental health. And they greatly found that women who had greater sexual partners had increased chances of alcohol abuse, substance abuse, and mental health issues. And this got me thinking. Father actually in this speech continues, and he uses some wild examples of young men looking for rich women, or cases of older men preying on younger teenage girls, and he uses some crazy, well, it's not even that crazy in today's society, we see it quite often, but he uses these bold examples of sexual promiscuity, of sexual misconduct in society to make this point that as people of faith, we should be focusing on God. We should be building our families in a God-centered way, in a pure way, even though society might be dictating otherwise, even though society might be saying something else. Like Daniel, we need to have that faith, that belief, that firm rootedness in God, that we are unchanging despite what society is dictating. And we see that it's a real minefield for young people this day with the rise of things like OnlyFans, internet pornography. It's shoved in our faces everywhere, and we need to push back against that degeneracy, and we need to push back and be strong and show that we are unashamedly people of faith, that we are people of God, we are people of integrity. I just wanted to finish by reading from this battered book which I rescued from someone's garbage bin. We had a worship service in Wales, and a member was throwing out lots of their books, but this one is titled Chun Hua Dan, which translates into the House of Heaven's Harmony, and it's essentially Father Son is talking about how when we embody God, then that impacts all of our aspects of our life, not just when we're doing public things like volunteer work or attending worship service, but even the small mundane things are opportunities to build and co-create with God. So the House of Heaven's Harmony. And in here, Father says, religion is a training centre, an educational institute to repair dysfunctional man and return to his original state. The mission of religion is to cultivate our character through a life of faith that embraces enlightenment and personal growth, so that we can attend God in our everyday lives. All faith should attach greater importance to educating and training individuals to perfect their character, thus raising them to become people of faith, than they do merely bringing people of faith through witnessing and sermons. So essentially our role as people of faith is to grow, to find ourselves in God, not just to gather here for worship or to attend peace meetings, but to really embody God, to move forward together unchangingly. So as I mentioned at the start, the conclusion is that we need to breathe God in. It starts with harmony between our mind and body, and that is a place then where God can dwell, because God can dwell in that goodness. And from there then we can expand to our family, our communities, the nation and the world. Thank you.
Thank you.